So this is When School's Not Working. I'm Michael Strong, founder of Expanse Online, with my illustrious colleagues, Tori, Andrew, and Kath. We'll say more about themselves in a minute. And we have our exceptionally illustrious guest, Matthew Barnes, and we'll talk more about Matt and what he does in a minute. Actually, Tori, you know, I mean, I'll give my version of Matt. Actually, this will be fun. How about each of us gives our version of an intro to Matt, and then he can tell us what we get wrong. So,
I love that.
My version is Matt is the founder of The Education Game, and when I first ran across his blog, thanks to Tori, I immediately saw that this is somebody who gets that A, learning is really important, and B, school is bullshit. And not everybody gets that. Some people reject school and reject learning. Other people love school and think learning happens there. And we're part of, I see Matt as a deep fellow traveler, and learning, yes, school, blah. So that's my quick, The Education Game, his website, hey, it's a game, well, and get what you want out of life, and focused on parents. So that's my Matt 101.
Can I take my shot at Matt?
Go for it, Andrew.
I'm Andrew Sachs. I'm a CEO for Noble Explorers, an international STEM and leadership learning community. And I had the pleasure of being double teamed by Matt and his partner on their podcast. And I had no idea that he was so good at professional wrestling, right? I think Matt and Scott, to their credit, deeply understand our challenges in the education system and how they are not serving our youth, and how we really need to, as a community, provide these youth, these families with other choices so that they can actually activate their kids rather than getting them crushed. So I learned a tremendous amount from Matt and Scott, and I want to say thank you.
Awesome. Terrific. Tori or Kath?
Sure. So somebody was actually asking me the other day, Matt, how we met. I can't actually remember. Was it Scott that introduced us?
I think it may have been LinkedIn, actually.
Just LinkedIn, getting connected on there.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I think the others have covered it pretty well. Matt really helps coaches. I don't know if that's the right word. Parents that are where their kids, where the school's not working, what their options are, what they should do. He's homeschooled his own 3 children extremely successfully. They're pretty amazing from everything I hear, and he is very passionate about helping. Yeah, well, you'll have to talk to them about the spectrum, right? But getting students from passive learners to self-directed learners, which is really what life is about, is getting them from the passive to the self-directed, where they are going out and learning what they need to learn to be happy and successful in life.
Terrific. Let's see what Kath says about Matt before we get to hear what Matt says about Matt.
Well, you know, it is such a pleasure doing anything with Matt, and on The Education Game, he and Scott run a really amazing webcast where he invites guests on, and then he grills us
and then beats them up right?
Yeah, but he asks the real questions, you know, and it is really, really hard to know, like, as a parent, when you've got your children in school, it is such a difficult time when, you know, it's very clear that it's not working for your child, or you really know that they're missing out, that that school is only addressing a very small part of what their needs are, and he really helps parents who, you know, you really don't have any idea what is available out there when you're doing that, when you do pull your kids out, because you just know that something is wrong. So to have people that you can talk to who've been there, who've done that, who know how to make a plan, who know how to get you started and point you in the right direction, and to even just be a sounding board when you're in this situation, you know, Matt and Scott are your guys, and they walk the talk, and they've been there, and they really understand what you're going through. So it was just a really awesome. It was an awesome experience meeting Matt, but also it's great to have someone who's also in the front lines with parents who are helping them through this transition, because it's really, really difficult. And there's so much pressure, you know, for you to keep your children in school, even though you know deep down that it's not the right choice. So people like Matt and I and everyone on this panel are here to give you more choices, so you don't feel as lost right at that beginning. And even if when you see a whole sea of choices, how do you know what is the right thing for your child as well? So we want to help you, fill in some of the blanks. And Matt is an awesome choice if you're trying to work out how to do that.
Terrific. And with that, Matt, we'll let you tell us.
Can I add one more thing to Matt?
Oh, go for it. Go for it.
I want to give Matt credit. I think he captioned himself as a reluctant homeschooler when he was faced with just a downright racist school administration and not wanting to expose your kids to that environment and all of the umbrella, that goes along with that. And I want to give him credit for immediately taking action and lighting the way for so many others to feel strong and stand up and say, listen, we can't take this, right? This is something that has to stop. So thank you for setting that example.
Very good.
And with that, we'll let Matt tell us what Matt actually does and why. And then we'll get into the fun questions.
Man, oh man, there's so many things I want to correct in what was just described, because you guys know me just that much. So no, first off, thank you guys. That's flattering and it's humbling. At my root, I'm a parent, right? I'm a dad. And I got into this working with parents because actually, and I talked to Michael about this a couple days ago, that I saw in my research, this is in a former life, about the outcomes that particularly boys of color faced. And it was so bad. It's so chronically bad that I started trying to figure out, all right, what's the source of this? Where is the lever that I feel uniquely prepared to actually engage in? It's not on the school side, although I've been in educational governance from the university, a public university, all the way down to a Head Start system board and everything in between. It's not governance. It's not principals. I don't believe it's even teachers. I believe it's the interplay between the parent and the child. And for the parent that realizes that they have a beautiful opportunity in front of them to launch their child into the 21st century prepared, that's where I get excited, right? And so, Kath mentioned about we want to give parents choices. I actually don't want to give them choices. What I want to give them is a vision of a child who is at the age of 14 or 15 years old, who is capable of handling themselves, of managing themselves, of leaning into learning, right? Not asking or not needing to have someone tell them what to learn, because they know why they have been placed on this earth and now they're pursuing it at the age of 15 years old. And I see that with some regularity, but I don't see it with kids who spend a heck of a lot of time in the school system. And so my work is to help parents have a vision of a child who they don't have to worry about anymore. That's like the peace that comes from that, which is where we are as parents. That peace is what I want every parent to feel. And so from that point is where I do my work.
Wow. Amen.
All right. Session over.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic, Matt. So, and first of all, I think all of us, one of the reasons we like to hang together is all of us are looking for better ways to talk. I'll acknowledge that I don't feel as if I or any of us really have figured out how actually to talk about what we want. And a frustration I've had about, say, unschooling is it's what's not rather than
right.
what is.
That's
and I
right.
think a positive vision is super important.
That's right. And if you think about it too, Michael, sorry to cut you off.
Go ahead.
Like every parent I've talked to, they know that the school has some serious, I mean, even like the quote unquote good schools, there's some serious problems there, right? But to Kath's point, when they feel like it's either school or a black hole of not sure how that's going to work, most parents default to school. And unschooling is kind of that black hole where you just kind of drop your kid, and that's not enough for most parents to feel comfortable making that choice. So yeah, we do need a better language. I like the language of a learner, of someone who is a young person who is flourishing. That's a word that I've started kicking around. And you can tell a kid who's not flourishing because they're generally not very curious. They're generally not super excited to learn. A flourishing individual, though, is constantly curious, is excited to learn, and that's kind of part of the vision that I'm hoping to start.
Just kind of related to that, I always encourage parents to respect their intuition and their instincts. That is, vitality is another one. That one of the reasons I'm excited about various alternatives, and this goes into Kat's language about choice, is not the choices per se, but that we all should want our children to be happy, engaged, flourishing, and so forth. And if they're not, alarm bells. One of the things that freaks me out is parents let their kids go to a school where they're miserable day in, day out. They kick them out of the bed, they force them to go. The kid says, complains about this or that. Yeah, kids complain, but one thing that unites certainly the four of us is that when school's not working, very often school is the problem. And as a consequence, we need to work with our child, not so that they quit doing things, but that they find, as you say, a positive vision.
Yeah.
What do you find, what are the biggest resistances that parents have? Or I'm thinking of kind of dragging people across the threshold. How do you, and maybe I shouldn't use dragging, but how do you coax them across the threshold?
I don't. What I tend to do is, so you asked the major kind of resistance, it's fear. It's a fear that their child is going to be harmed for life if they pull them out and do something different, right? They don't have very many models of other families who have done something different and their kids have gone on to be amazing young people. They haven't seen that. They're out there. And in fact, this year, that's one of our efforts, is to make sure we bring some more light to those families that did do something different and saw amazing results. So fear is the number one that we run into. And then the second was a more tactical and kind of practical one, which is the logistics of taking ownership of that educational and learning responsibility, right? So people being like, oh, how, what should they learn, and what's the curriculum, and where are they going to be? Like if the child is, under age 10 or so, who's going to supervise them? Those are logistical barriers that can be overcome. And again, for every parent, I never want to pull them along. I want to say, parent, you're in charge. You know your child better than anyone else. What is it that you want for them? And if they can craft a vision that they can get excited about, then from there they start building up a little bit of more courage and musculature to actually take on some of these challenges and build a plan. And once you have a reasonable plan, a lot of that fear starts to melt away. So.
That makes sense. And I think a lot of parents are intimidated by the educational establishment. I'm going to tease Andrew. Andrew is still saying, I don't have real credentials. My wife's a teacher. That's my only credential. So right. What do you say to parents who think, oh, I'm not adequately educated. I need to rely on the experts. How do you coax them over that one?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's a very culturally, it's like a embedded belief that we as parents can't teach our kids things. So what I usually do is I'll start to ask parents, okay, let's think about a time when you played a significant role in the learning of your child or the education of your child. And so to my surprise, a lot of parents will say, I can't think of anything. And then I ask basic questions. Who taught them how to read, or how to walk, or how to hold a spoon, or how to, use a bathroom on the potty? Who taught them, how to speak? Who taught them how to make their bed? There are all these things that every parent teaches. Apparently, I wasn't able to teach my kids how to make their bed, but the other things I got, because my kids still don't make their bed. But once parents start to realize, I have taught my kids. Now it's the next question of, what were the practices and the strategies that you use? Taught your kid to brush your teeth. What are the practices and strategies you use there? Therefore, you can do the same with other things. But then the other part is really turning it around, Michael. And how many times have your children learned things on their own? And that's a very long list. And so now the question is to the parent, okay, maybe you don't have to teach them. Maybe you have to support their learning or feed their curiosity, and then they will begin to teach themselves. And that is, again, a difference between what school provides and what a learning environment actually looks like.
So I'm thinking there are millions of parents right now where their kids are in virtual school. They can see what's going on in the virtual classroom from their school. What would you advise parents? How should they evaluate? If so, how should they evaluate? If they're actually seeing the lessons because it's piped into their homes, any recommendations for parents?
Oh, yes. This is something that a lot of parents now are seeing for the first time. They're seeing how the sausage of school actually gets made, right? And they're seeing, boy, my kid is spending a heck of a lot of time just kind of hanging out, right? A heck of a lot of time doing things that they are absolutely bored, senseless doing, right? And then in addition to that, now they get homework that also doubles down on that boredom. And so parents are now seeing like, okay, is this what we're getting for 7 hours of school, right? Is this really the product? And if it is, my goodness, yes, I could actually do pretty close to this pretty easily. And so a lot of parents are now realizing that there are many opportunities. I'll tell you another barrier though is the social barrier, right? So whenever I tell parents that that we've homeschooled our kids, which is not exactly the right language, I'm not exactly sure what the right language is, but people always say, well, how do you socialize your kids? And I have this list of things that my kids are involved with and friends, et cetera. And so a lot of parents feel afraid if they pull them out, their child is going to become, stay in their room, become an isolated kind of bookworm and be awkward. And there are some examples of those kids historically in the homeschool community. That narrative though is old. So anyway, what I would say to a parent, watch what's happening in school closely. And if you are concerned about it, then you need to make some calls. And one of them calls is to us or to any of the folks on this call today.
I think one of the bigger challenges that those parents face is really moving from there's something wrong with my child and my child needs to adjust to the system to knowing, to really feeling strongly that, hey, I've got to push back, right? And I've got to push back in favor of my child, and what the system is asking of my child isn't actually right. I think that's probably either for conformity, for fear, for not being, not following the pathway that leads everyone to this promised land of college. I think that's one of the bigger barriers that they face. So maybe connecting not only with us, but also with other parents, with whole groups of parents that have brought their kids out of schools and helping them see and hear, what are the clues that help them feel sure that they're making the right path, they're making the right choice for their kids.
Right. Yeah. Parents are the best teachers in this space, in my view.
So suppose a parent is watching this and they're like 50% buying what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
What are the 3 things they should do tomorrow to move forward?
Yes, great question. So if you're 50% there, then the first thing you'll need to do is to begin a negotiation with your teacher, with your child's teacher. And that negotiation looks something like this. Right now, they may spend, 4 hours, 3 hours, 5 hours on this online kind of structure. Outside of that, they have other busy work they're doing. What I tell parents is to start the conversation with the teacher that sounds something like this. Teacher, I've got 2 kids, 3 kids. I can't manage all the different things that are going on. So what I'm going to do though, is I'm going to now, instead of science course with each of my child's teachers, I would like to have one science course that all my kids can participate together, and I'm going to lead that. And I need your help, teacher, to give me some space to do that. So what you're doing is you're creating space for a different type of learning in your home. A lot of the families that we talk to, they try to add on onto an existing really crammed, busy day of busy work, additional things where the child now has teaching themselves, or the child exploring things they're curious about. That's a terrible idea, because the kids are already booked solid, and now you're putting more work on them. Instead, negotiate less volume from the school to create space, and then use that space to ask the child, what are you curious about? And now let's begin a discovery based on what your interests are, rather than the interests of the bureaucrat 1,000 miles away that wrote the textbook that you're reading today in science class. So negotiation, and then creating the space to build a different type of learning plan for a child based on their own interests.
I mean, knowing what I do about most public school teachers and administrators, my expectation is 99% would say, A, you can't do that, and B, you'll be harming your child if you do that.
So that's not been my experience, and I'm doing the shortened version of how you would enter into this negotiation. But most teachers, if they have the confidence that you are a parent who's actually leaning into your child's learning, and now you're coming to them with a proposal, but it's a pretty firm proposal. It's a proposal of how we're going to do things differently. Yes, they'll still do some aspects of what school is assigning, but on these areas, again, it's like, I can't do it, teacher. I can't do it well. So we're going to do something differently. Most teachers, my experience is 90% of the time, the teachers will say, maybe a reluctant, okay, but a recognition of at least the child is in the home of the parent. The parent has far more leverage to demand things right now. And the parent and the teacher realizes, heck, if this mom is leaning into it, there's dad leaning into it, they're going to probably learn more. And most teachers, in my experience, want that. So no, I don't think it's going to be much pushback at all. When it does become pushback, though, have you guys ever heard of the circus act where the circus act, the individual is riding on two horses, one foot on each horse, right? Mm-hmm. At some point, as parents start to explore these areas of interest and learning that's different than school, they're essentially putting their foot on another horse. And at some point, they're going to have to decide which horse to get on. And in my experience is there's a transition period where parents become more comfortable with learning in a non-traditional way. They start to see their children thrive. They start to see their children become much more curious. And then they start to say, you know what, I've got to get off of this horse that is, doing the opposite for my child. And then they're on the learning horse, so to speak, from that point on.
I'm delighted to hear most teachers are cooperative. Just on the most negative end, have you ever run into a situation where a teacher says your child will fail if you do that, or basically a threat?
Yes. I had a great experience. This was a couple of years ago, actually, a situation where a parent, every summer, my whole point is, why does learning have to stop in the summer? Learning happens all the time, right? School stops in the summer, but learning should be going on all the time. So a lot of families will continue learning, and one parent continued their math learning, right? Got to school the next year. That child had learned the entire next grade of their mathematics and petitioned the school to skip that level of math. And the teacher said, no, we can't, because your child is in 4th grade and they have to do 4th grade math. Even though they've mastered all the concepts, they even offered to take the end of year test to prove her competence. That parent ended up going to the principal, got the same, no answer from the principal. And that parent then began to organize. She began to talk to people. She began to talk to people in the media. It didn't ultimately end up working because that parent ended up having to find another school that was more supportive of her views. But her child, all that work, her child is doing amazingly well, right? Not to mention is a grade ahead of math, and I think is 2 grades ahead of math at this point. So yes, there is going to be conflict in this at some point, but the fight is over the right principles. The fight is over my child's future, rather than conforming to a system that fundamentally doesn't care if my child is successful 20 years from now or not, or even 10 years from now. They have no loss in that. The parent has the most to gain and the most to lose from the interaction of their child and their child's learning. So the parent at some point is going to have to bow up. And that's where, again, programs like myself and many of the folks on the line can help parents make sure they're ready if they do have to get off of that horse.
I'm gonna add on to Matt's comment. My daughter, my wife knew a particular math teacher that my daughter was going to have, and she was determined to make sure that she didn't actually experience that teacher, because I think if you actually, I feel like I know this anecdotally, but if you look back at many kids who are challenged in math, right, you'll find along the way math trauma, some teacher, some experience that wasn't good. And my wife was like, I'm not going to let that happen. Right. And so she went to the principal, and the principal, basically said, no, we can't do that. And so she went over to the principal. Right. And as parents, right, in the era of social media, right, you really have an incredible amount of influence. And so long as you're able to do the research and make your case and present it in a good fashion and represent it as something that's going to further the education of your child, don't at all shy away from taking those steps.
And let me just mention, thank you for that, Andrew, because social media it has been a game changer. Now that parent could have told the story on social media. Here's what's happening. What do you guys think? And they would have gotten 10,000, support responses. And then that is actually creating pressure, bottom-up pressure on the system to change. So yes, great point, Michael, or I'm sorry, Chris, Andrew, whatever your name is.
So just one quick anecdote. I once knew a woman, a mother who was, I would say, a very assertive, borderline aggressive mother. And she liked the first half of the school day of the local public school and didn't like the second half. She went and said, my child is going to school till noon and then he's coming home for the rest of the day. The school said, you can't do that. And she said, look, I know that you get the per pupil expenditure from the state if my child goes half the day. It's in your interest to accept this deal. Otherwise, I pull them out entirely. They backed off.
Right. So okay. Let me also give you my background. So my professional background is healthcare administration. So I was an administrator at a hospital, ran a bunch of pediatric medical practices. And so what I saw was parents who came in with that exact same mindset, Michael. They didn't see themselves as being aggressive. They saw themselves as being, I am here to make doggone sure my child is healthy and strong and safe. And if I get a hint that there's a problem, you're going to have to deal with me, right? And it's a life or death situation in a hospital setting. What most parents don't really make the connection is that it's life or death in the child's education as well, particularly for students of color, right? This is serious business. And so if you're going to kind of go, well, I guess it's going to be okay, or I don't like the outcome, but I guess I'll just sit back and take it. That is no different than you going and taking your child to a hospital and you seeing some negative procedure done and you just sitting back and saying, well, I guess I won't say anything. No, it is your responsibility to step forward. Again, I would love to help you with the language of how to do that. Go to our website and you can schedule a time with me to kind of talk through some of that. So.
No, great. And I realized with my the hashtag I'm promoting, Mama Bear Revolution, it doesn't give credit to dads, but there's just this image of a mama bear that's I think in some ways a great stereotype. I want to see, is there a place on your website with kind of or what is your website? What resources does your website offer? Just so parents know exactly what they can find there.
Yeah. So right now we have blogs, we have podcasts, and then we have something we're calling the promise and the plan, which is essentially the beginnings of a step-by-step process for a family who's wondering, how do I understand how to teach my child or how to help my child learn in a way that's different than a traditional school? And so it starts with an assessment. Essentially, you do a survey with your child, both of you answering a series of questions that start to get a better sense of what's really important in the life of your child. As an example, how would you rate your child in persistence? Right? I would argue that that's a better question than any question that your child has been asked in school in the last 10 years. Child, how are you in persistence? Because if the answer is, I'm not very persistent, boy, maybe that's an area that we need to start practicing and building the skills of persistence. That's a character trait. What about empathy? How empathetic are you? Not very. Okay, well, now we probably need to spend some time building empathy, because these are all the skills that create a successful adult. Math is not a skill that creates a successful adult. I would even argue reading is not a skill that creates a successful adult. You have to have it. But what creates a successful adult are these intangible, these quote unquote soft skills that are really character skills. Persistence. Again, I mentioned what did I mention a minute ago?
Empathy.
Empathy. Thank you. Thank you. Mindfulness. What is the self-talk that you're having around yourself? Like, how do you define success? That's another really important conversation, right? So when normally we talk about a successful young person, we think that they're a straight A student. And you guys know, and I've seen so many. In fact, I just had a conversation with a parent a few days ago. Straight A student, completely anxious, struggling emotionally because she can't get a B, right? Her life will crumble if she gets a B in a subject that she doesn't care about. That is not success, in my view, in terms of learning. That is a traditional mindset that has no place in the 21st century. You got me preaching now, so sorry. I will go.
Preach it, Matt. Preach it.
Wait, I'm on the other pulpit over here. Amen to what Matt just said, and I'll relate the story of my own daughter, who was an eager learner, had her own reading group in kindergarten, the most empathetic kid you can imagine. right? And was I sent her to the best school, one of the top STEM schools in the nation, right? And had no idea that I was manufacturing an unbelievable amount of anxiety and worry. Here's a confident, high social emotional, very talented, very driven person who, for no reason at all, for no good reason, had incredible amounts of anxiety about how she was doing and who she was comparing herself to, right? And poison, just something that she's now, I feel like, really done a tremendous amount to recover from. But when I look at that high performing school, I'm convinced now it actually damaged her.
Yeah. Let me give you a few more of the questions that to me are the questions that matter. And I wrote a blog post a few weeks ago about measuring what matters. I want you to think about these questions, and for the parents listening, imagine what your child would answer, and then go and ask them these questions, a couple of them. I know the things I'm curious about. Ask your child that. Do you know what you're curious about? And when they say and I have a whole conversation about if they say no, they don't know what they're curious about. We can talk about that, but that's a hugely important question. What about this one? I think before I act. How you doing on that? Maybe we need to practice. And there are ways and skills of how to practice that. What about this one? I like to ask questions. I like to use what I've learned in everyday situations. I like to create new ways of doing things. I'd like to be known as a curious person. I like to solve problems, right? These are questions that are never evaluated in a school context, but yet these are the questions that absolutely create a 21st century beast of an adult, but it's never evaluated in a school context.
Totally agree. I'm going to go into the whole issue of black boys a little bit more. And just for some context, I think middle school is especially dangerous for all kids, especially large public middle schools. Maybe smaller communities, it's not so bad. I personally have two grown kids who, with a white mother, who, when I went and visited their fourth grade and I saw the lunchroom, pulled them out of school immediately. No questions asked. That was the last day they ever saw inside of a public school. My current wife is black, and we've thought about having kids. And when I just, the flick of a thought in my brain of having a black boy, I'm like, no way, no way, no way, no way, no way. Separately, I'm mentoring or coaching, consulting with an African family of means who's coming to the US, and the thought of sending their black boy to a public, not even on the map. So I'd love to both your own personal experience and how you think about that. Where and when might it be okay for a family to send their black boy to a regular school?
Yeah. Well, if you, in our previous conversation, Michael, I disclosed that again, the studies that I did and the research around the outcomes of boys of color, particularly black boys, are so grim that in many ways, if you follow the herd on this one, you are almost assuredly getting yourself in trouble. And so what would I advise? A lot of it depends on the context of the family, but there is no question that there's something toxic, not just in the United States culture, but in our schools proper around boys of color, particularly black boys. And I'll just tell you a quick story. I mean, I think Andrew mentioned it early at the beginning. My son was was enrolled in a school for his kindergarten. He was going to start the following Sunday, and it was in the Wednesday before. There was a newspaper clipping that showed how the principal had been telling her staff that she wanted her child, who was coming into school that same year, she wanted her child to be in a classroom with, quote, other good white neighborhood kids. And she said this multiple times to staff. Now that is terrible, right? And this became a real public issue, but the school system, they kind of gave her a bit of a slap on the wrist, and it is what it is. But in the meeting that we had the Friday before school started, her apology was that she was so excited that her grandson was starting school with that year that she kind of lost herself. So really her apology was, I disclosed how I really feel, right? Sorry for disclosing that. But the real problem, Michael, is that I really had to think long and hard about whether I would pull him out. Like, what does it mean that I would hear this principal articulate these thoughts, and me still going, well, maybe I'll still leave him there. Maybe there's a school that I should consider, right? That I was even in that mindset really infuriates me now, but that's part of how deeply we all are indoctrinated to believe that school is the only pathway to a successful life. Now, having pulled him out, I can tell you that I want to now thank that principal, because she opened my eyes to the reality that I, Matt Barnes, and my wife, we are responsible for my child's future. We are responsible. Nobody's going to hurt like we hurt when our child is not doing well. And no one's not going to celebrate like we celebrate when our child is doing well. Now, going further, before that moment, I kept seeing signs of teachers, and when we're doing interviews for schools and things like that, of people saying, well, you know, he's a black boy, you know, don't expect too much, right? Things, he can't do certain things, right? I heard that multiple times in different ways, softly, but there was definitely there. And then, you know, my son, who's just killing it academically, he's a beast. I mean, an absolute beast, and nobody would recognize that. And so I had to start fighting off these affronts that would come from media, would come from my family members, would come from people in my church. The first question they'd ask him is not, what have you read? It's, do you like basketball? Right? That's a cultural message that assumes that my child is more interested in basketball than in learning. That is part of what's in our water. So I had to become the battler, and it's exhausting, but you know, my son is just crushing it. He's just absolutely lights out. But it required a ton of effort, and I want to help parents know how to fight smarter. I spent a lot of effort. I didn't have to fight that hard for as long. I could have done a lot better with it.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I think when you told that the first time, my heart sank. I think until you talk to someone that it's really impacted, or until you see it happen, I don't think we can imagine what you and these kids are going through. And obviously, what a tremendous gift, you know, what a tremendous action you took on behalf of your kid. But I also think, I think what's wonderful that you guys take ownership. I think it's borderline criminal that's the kind of exposure that we put our parents, or choices we put our parents up against.
Yeah, no, and Andrew, you know, I ran for school board in Houston last year. I lost in a very close race, but the single thing I talked about at every stop was 1 out of 10 kids in third grade, 1 out of 10 black boys in third grade are reading on grade level. Now, we want to talk criminal. That to me is borderline criminal, right? That if that was any other demographic, the whole world would stop, and we would devote all attention to making sure these kids are reading at least on grade level. But the expectations that we have for black boys, again, it's in our water. So our expectations are just so low. And I don't think that the system is going to overcome that. I think it's going to have to be parents that say, no, son, we are going to expect higher of you. And that's, again, I argue, pulling out of the system that chronically messages low expectations, low standards, from grade inflation to test scores that nobody would ever tolerate. That is very common in black schools. And also another excuse as well, it's the parents' fault. That's what I hear a lot when I've worked in some schools. Well, this is the best we can do because of the parents. No, if that's the best you can do, then you need to be talking to the parent every day. You shouldn't even bother with anything else. Go to the parent if that's the source. I argue that parents love their child, and every parent I've met loves their child the same amount as I do. Most parents don't understand the system, so they're left blindsided by it. They realize way too late that their children are behind. Their children who've been getting A's and B's for 10 years, all of a sudden their reading is not on grade level. They're not passing standardized tests. They're certainly not competitive in a college environment. These are all structural problems that I would argue is borderline criminal and is part of what I'm rallying against.
It's a tangent, but and I'll let you go, Andrew, after this one. But in some ways, the way you're talking, and it makes sense, sounds like the language behind the advocates of no no excuses schooling? You know, KIPP was started in Houston, Success Academy in New York has done well. What's your take on no excuses schooling?
Well, it kind of depends on it. So I've had a lot of exposure to KIPP here in Houston, and you know, initially I was super excited about it, but I have lost all excitement about the model, because what it tends to do is it's messages to the parent: you get your child in here, and we're going to take it from here, and the data doesn't bear that out. Right. So that's the first part. The second part is, how many days, and I'll put this to the group, right? How many days every year, or the families listening, how many days is your child in school per year? And in a traditional year, of course, this is a weird coronavirus year, but in a traditional year, how many days is your child in school? Now, the answer is 180 days. Mm-hmm. That means 185 days that child doesn't darken the doorstep of that school. So what happens in those 185 days? And if the school's message is, we're going to get your child set and ready to go, that's not true. If the school's message is, parent, we're here to be a support to what your goals are. What do you want for your child? Now, that is an empowering conversation. But no school is ready to ask that question, because the parent might say things that the school doesn't want to hear. Parent might say, I don't want to read any more about Western civilization. I want to hear about, leaders in Africa, right? Can that be part of our history? Because now the whole school system has to get new books and change everything up in order to please and to meet the goals of the parent. And no school really wants to do that. The school wants to meet the goals of efficiency. And efficiency does not equate to positive outcomes, as the data shows. I'm preaching again, aren't I?
Yeah, but it does sound like a parent, and this is a hypothesis, that if a no excuses school was adequately partnering with parents and had adequately sensitive curriculum, then a no excuses school might be a good solution.
Well, again, so the idea of a no excuses school is, generally speaking, when you're on this campus, there are no excuses. Mm-hmm. When you leave this campus, well, we don't, right? We don't have a role to play in that. And I'm arguing that's upside down. Mm-hmm. The conversation should start with the parent in a way that is as firm, but also as respectful, because that parent is in my language, the God-given authority for that child. And what that parent wants and what that parent aspires to should be the driver. And as the child ages up, what the child aspires to should become the driver of learning, of the curriculum. And that, again, schools have not even come close to appreciating the power of empowering a parent with that language, or the power of empowering a child with that language. What do you want? Let me help you get what you are after. Now, again, there's a whole conversation we could have about how do you help a child be prepared for adult life if you're only asking them what they want? Well, you can feather in things that they need, but if you only give them things that you think they need and never ask them what they want, that's a fundamentally disrespectful activity in my view.
Can I go back to your example of the messages that we're sending our kids?
Yeah.
And I think you brought up something interesting. You were talking about like your child and then they're not necessarily achieving the grades, right? And you notice that. Is there a even bigger challenge that preceding the grades, that we're doing this psychological damage to our kids, and that eventually that shows up in grades, but that damage is going on prior to the grades?
Yeah. And I may have misspoken there. So I can't begin. We should have a whole conversation, Michael, about grades and what grades actually do. Now, again, I talked about my son being this academic beast. He is, but here's what grades did to him. A kid who was largely homeschooled for his entire, after kindergarten, we pulled him out. He was homeschooled until he wanted to go to a traditional public school in high school. Very curious kid, was involved with all these weird things, got into public school. The curriculum went from here to here, right, overnight, just got narrowed. And it's actually a fairly innovative school, frankly. And so this is actually it's a more flexible school than most, but it's still narrowed dramatically. He got praised for doing average work. He got A's for doing average works. What's the message there?
Damage.
The message
Damage.
is, oh, I don't actually have to work that hard, right? And I fought. I was upset. I was angry. Like, the kids, they would tell me they got straight A's, and I'm like, all right, well, tell me about your effort. What was your effort level? Was it 90% or higher? No. Then I'm not going to celebrate that, dude. I can't celebrate that because they are crippling you in a way that I will not endorse.
Amen. Amen.
So this is one of many things. Now here, let me go the opposite side. Let's say there's a kid who actually really dug in, and actually I talked to a parent about this a few weeks ago. Kid who dug in, did the homework, did all they could do, took the test, got a 76 on it. Felt like a failure, right? And what does that do in terms of the psychology of that student? That teaches them, hey, why bother, right? You put a bunch of effort in, you're going to get a 76. Well, maybe shouldn't try so hard.
I'm no good at that. I don't need. I'm no good at that. That's not my thing.
That's one. The other one may be it's not worth the effort, right? I could have not done this effort and gotten maybe a 72, right? I could have not worked so hard. So we are sending so many crazy messages with grades that it absolutely corrupts what learning should be. It should be a discovery that is exciting, that is fun, that motivates, right? We need entrepreneurs in the 21st century like crazy. But having grades teaches a kid to hate and to fear failure, which is the exact opposite of what an entrepreneur actually needs to be prepared to do. As many of y'all know who are entrepreneurs on this call, you have to love failure because the 21st century is going to be all about learning from failure, adapting, keep trying until you figure something out. That's what our schools do not teach.
Two things on that, Matt. The fear of failure, that is a huge one where basically we're raising an entire generation saying, like, you need to be perfect or you're not going to get into a good college. And then we wonder why they're all incredibly anxious all the time. And
Bingo.
It's just like, what kind of message does that say? And why they're scared to take anything that might even be the risky class at all.
Not just message. You're burning the neurons in their head.
Yeah.
This is how they are being built now. Is to do this thing and only do this thing if they can do it perfectly, and they're worried about exactly doing what you tell them to do, which, as we know, is exactly the opposite of what everybody needs to do in the workforce, entrepreneurship or anything, right?
That's right. Yep. Everybody is an entrepreneur from this point on. Whether you work for a company, whether you're a gig employee, whether you're starting your own business, you're constantly solving problems. You're constantly looking for opportunities to improve a process. That is why people are going to outcompete computers. It's because we can be much more innovative and creative than a computer, at least so far. Let me give you another quick. Can I give you another quick story about? Right. So,
can I? I was going to hop in on your grades just for a second, Matt.
Yeah,
really quick. But Clayton Christensen did a book called Disrupting Class, and the most interesting part of it was they really dug into the motivators. What really motivates kids? And it's going to sound really obvious when I state it. It's like, one, they want to do fun things with their friends. And two, they want to feel like they've really mastered something, really succeeded at something, like really, did something valuable, and that they're good at it, right? And we have a grading system, like you just pointed out, where anything with your friends is cheating. So like you're supposed to stay by yourself, and then constantly telling them, well, you're a B student, you're a C student, you're a D student. And we wonder why they lose all motivation by the time they get to high school, because they've been told over and over, you're not that great and you can't have any fun with their friends. It's like the exact opposite of anything you'd want motivationally in education.
And this is the kind of message that we need to amplify, because most parents, they go, oh my gosh, I never thought of that, right? It's not because parents are like intentionally trying to put their kids in a tough spot. No one's talked to them about this. By the way, I used to consult for schools, for school districts. They paid me to go out and work with families to do about parent engagement work, right? And I kept running into these situations where the message that the parent needed to hear was a message that my employer didn't want me to tell. Grade inflation. Like what you just described, that grades actually can create all these weird circumstances. So discourage your child from focusing on grades. Like all these things, don't take the standard, the state test. You can opt out, right? If your child's anxious about it, don't take it. There's other ways to evaluate how your child is doing. That is, again, back to my healthcare background. That's like asking a kid to take a blood test and then shaming them when they have a negative outcome, right? It's the exact same circumstance. So briefly, because I'm on my pulpit again here, one son who went into public school, got so much, acclaim and praise that he really couldn't leave. He started realizing that he has kids, or he has classes that he wants to take, but he can't take it because he's the number one kid in school, academic, like grade wise, right? GPA wise, right? So I can't take that class. That sounds like a fun class because I need to take the AP class in order to stay on top, right? That led up. Now he's a valedictorian. I've been from the moment he started. I told his calculus teacher, please, I need you to do something for me. I need you to force him to work harder than he's ever worked. And then I need you to give him a B. He's never gotten a B. He's never had to work hard for that, right? She couldn't do it, right? And I don't blame her for that. I have another daughter, same upbringing, got to high school, worked her tail off, 7 hours at school, 2 hours at night, every night, straight A student. And at the end of that year, she was like, you know what? I could have learned that in a 1/10 of the time. And, I don't want to do that again. I have these other things I want to explore. And so since then, she's been doing all these, again, unschooling projects, going to college, taking college courses at the University of St. Thomas. I mean, so even in my own family, I have these kids that have taken these very different pathways. But the key point for families is their job is to coach their child along this journey. At some point, the child's going to have to make their own choices, and they're going to have to live with those choices. But before that point, parent is the dominant influencer of that child, and parents have to lean into that, and that's part of our job to help them learn how to do that better.
So Nina is asking, thank you, Matt, have you been successful getting kids' schools to change any of their evaluation systems?
No. That is the straight answer, no. But here's how it will change. Nina, I don't know where you are, but if you're a parent or whatever, but if you have 10 parents in your grade level, in the same grade level as your child, who are all pushing in the same direction on that school around, pick your topic, the inflexibility of the school day, grade inflation, the number of grades or tests and how that's grading. If there's 10 parents that are all moving and advocating and arguing in the same direction, that school is going to have to pay attention to you because of social media, because of regular media. 10 people advocating for something that's the right thing for kids, that's news. So I have not been able to, but what I help parents do is to help gather other parents so that they can drive it.
So one thing that I'm very tuned in to kind of the nature of your message, Matt, and one part of your message is parents responsible, parent engagement, that kind of thing. I think 90% of parents think, oh, it means I need to make sure my kid does his homework. But yeah. Your message is much more radical than that. So, or maybe it's not. Maybe sometimes making sure the kid does their homework is not. So I'm interested to know, how does a parent know when just to support what the school's doing versus when to push back against the school?
Yeah. So in many ways, this is like a physical trainer. Right. So when I talk to a parent, I get a sense of what their strength level is. And if they're really amped up and they're really upset, they're now at level 8. Right. And at level 8, you're going to have to either decide to get on the horse, fight the enemy, right, battle, or get off the horse. That's kind of your options. For most parents, though, they're kind of putting their toe in the water, or they're trying to explore it. And so then it's really a question of, all right, well, how do we begin the process of moving along to the point where you can decide? And some parents, for legitimate logistical reasons, they say, you know what, I can't leave the school. And I got no criticism for that. You are the parent, you are in charge. And so I don't ever even use the word engagement anymore, Michael. I talk about parent ownership. You are the owner of your child's future. You're the head coach of your child. If you are operating as a head coach, that means that you have authority more over anyone else that comes around your child. Over your mother, the grandmother, right? Over the principal, over the teacher. You are the head coach. So therefore, your voice should carry the dominant weight. And so that's kind of the language that I actually use now, as opposed to parent engagement or partnership. It's not a partnership. It is a parent who has a valuable product or not product, a valuable jewel. And it's their job to protect that jewel and to give it to the world as shiny and as bright as humanly possible, because that's what the world needs.
Well, I am totally sold that you need to write a book. We need to get you on national media. We need to have meetings of all these things you're saying. So, you know, we're going to work on promoting the heck out of your message. But we've got 4 minutes left. Any last kind of summing up? Well, in 4 minutes, what is the final sermon from Matt Barnes?
From me? Okay. Final sermon.
Parent ownership.
I want every parent who might be listening to think about a continuum between the left and the right here, not political left and right, but just left and right. On the left side is a traditional school. Child doesn't decide what's studied. It's adult led. It only happens between the hours of 8 and 3. Restrictions, right? All these things that are traditional in school. On the right side is the vision, which is a learner. And that child loves to learn. And he or she finds something that excites them, and they go deep. And they dive so deep that by the time they're 12 or 13, they're an expert in that topic. Or they dive deep in a topic, and then they find out that's interesting, and then they find something else, and they dive deep in the next topic, and they dive deep in the next topic, until they find the thing that lights up their soul. That is a child that you no longer have to worry about, because they are going to learn whatever they need. They're going to learn how to learn, one, and then they're going to be able to learn whatever they need to live a life without constant oversight from someone else. On the left side of this is a child who is dependent. On the right side is a child who is independent and interdependent because they're curious. That's the stark kind of choice that families are going to make. We help parents move to the right on that scale.
No, that's terrific. And one of the things, you know, so educationgame.com, theeducationgame.com, that's where they go. And you have a podcast. You want to, you know, promote your podcast for a minute?
Yeah, we have a podcast that you can get there from our website. But the thing I actually want to promote is we have a free service where parents can call and schedule a one-on-one conversation with myself or Dr. Scott and talk about their situation. What we tend to do is we record it with their permission, and then we want to actually amplify that without their names, to let parents know here's the kind of work we do, and here's the kind of questions or answers we give to questions that parents have. So there's question that Nina sent on. That could be a call in that we would then say, help me understand your situation. Here's what we'd recommend for you. Then we amplify that out, and hopefully other families can hear that and go, okay, that's what I can do too. So go to the educationgame.com website, click free help, and there's a button to schedule an appointment there.
Terrific. Any last words from my colleagues, Tori, Andrew, Kath?
Yeah, I am so excited. I was so stimulated listening to you, Matt, and the way that you describe this journey that parents go on, I think is really brilliant. So I second what Michael said about writing a book. And I just want people to know that they can get, like, if they have missed it or they want to share this with other people, because this was such a great night and such great information. They can get a copy of this webcast, right, Michael? Where would they find that?
At the When School's Not Working Facebook page. There will be a recorded copy there, and we want you to follow us at When School's Not Working on Facebook. There's also a When School's Not Working website, and we want to grow this audience. So we have a larger community of people who own their own child's education. And with that, we are at 8 o'clock. Thank you very much, Matt Barnes, for joining us.
My pleasure.
And yeah, we will see the audience next week. And Matt, we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Thanks, Matt.
Bye.